hopefully I can share this. There we go. So I'll go through them, and then we're going to have Brad Can talk about talent ID. I don't know, he's excited to share his thoughts with that, and I'm excited to listen to them. So I'll just go through this, and I'll send the slides out, so there's no need. You can take notes as you go, but I'll send these slides as prompts for you. I'll just look through it as we go. So return to training guidelines. We've obviously, more of these will come out over the coming days, and we've got, from Basketball Tasmania standpoint, we've got a couple of meetings early next week to nut this out, and obviously around school venues as well as CAM venues. But just whatever environment you're going to be involved in, just make sure you're across the protocols, right, for your organisation or for your training session when you get back in the gym. Make sure you're prepared, because we're going to have to be patient, not only with our practice flow, but patient with the athletes, right? And we need to be part of the solution of everything, not part of the problem, right? And people are going to we're going to be the first point of call, most likely when we get back on the floor, because we'll be in the gym with the athletes. So we need to be organised across all the protocols, whatever they may be when they come out. And people will be looking for us for leadership. So if you're not really sure about it, then, it's your job to find out. A great resource for us and for everybody will be David Munns, all right, or the 3 BDOs, obviously, if we're working together. But what we're saying is don't take anything just for granted. Make sure that we do things the right way, because we can be a leader in this space in state sporting organisations throughout Tasmania. You would have seen the functional movement video that's come out in the last 24 hours. It's on our BTAS Facebook. If you jump on there, and it's Peter Lonigan's produced it with a physio that works with the Australian junior teams. So that's now online, and we want everybody to really start to delve into that as part of their injury prevention plan when they go back. It's going to be crucial that we have a real focus around this. We've just been doing a little bit of research today before it got on. The AFL, as of yesterday, had 18 injuries, and they've been back basically for 5 minutes. And I've just read a paper on the German Bundesliga, which is really the first league in the world that's up and going, and their injury rate has gone through the roof. Because even though they're elite athletes, they're just not ready for the amount of work. It'll be no different for the athletes that we're going to be involved in, and with special caution around our female athletes in that 14 to 17 age bracket, all right, around stress fractures. Coming in and overtraining and going flat out right from the start, right? You need to be very, very careful from that standpoint. So warming up and cooling down is going to be essential. Everyone will definitely not come back at the same level. You'll have some athletes that'll be really, really well conditioned, ready to go, and then you'll have some athletes that may not have done anything. And no matter who it is, there'll be a detraining of everyone that would have taken place over this time. So you need to cater for everybody, not come back in and just start off where a Sardines is, and then we go flat out and we have injury problems. And that's on us to be able to control that. So the concept of slow, small, and daily between all of us, all right, whether it's BTAS athletes, whether it's CAM athletes, between all of us, we've got to take that concept, slow, small, and daily. So from a training drill standpoint, try and link in your functional movement in with basketball as much as you can. And we talked about it yesterday, how everybody's going to want to get back and be really, really aggressive, or want to be competitive. So try and link in with the basketball in their hands as much as possible. Obviously, there's no transfer of the ball with passing and stuff to start with, but as much as you possibly can, mirror your game movements, start, stop, change your direction, pivoting. Just the basic fundamental movements early. Use time and score and targets to make it competitive, right, when obviously you can't compete. And then as we move into the next phase, the new phase, when we start to get to competing, all right, be conservative still. We've got to take the athlete well-being is most important. Another part of it that we talked about is having little flight path meetings with the athletes. So while we're coaching, all right, you need to find time, whether it be 10, 15, 20 seconds, 30 seconds as you're moving around the practice court, that you can have quick flight path meetings with the athletes. Right? They've had massive changes in their lives over the last 3 months, whether it be at school, whether it be at home. You know, the detraining effect, and they come back and they're really struggling, right? Or it might be the athlete that's done a lot of work and they've got to fit in and they're a little bit impatient of other athletes, right, from that standpoint. So make sure that we have those little flight path chats, check in with people, all right, make sure that you can allay anyone's fears and everything will be okay, all right? We're going to be slow and conservative, but everything will be all right in the long run. They will want to go, so they want to get in and play, and so will you. You will want to move quicker. There's no doubt. You want to get back into 3-on-3, 5-on-5, and play right quicker. But you've got to keep in the back of your mind, we can't have injured athletes. That's our responsibility. All right. So when heading into the competing phase, be aware that they haven't had to make any decisions or avoiding any traffic for 3 months. All right. So when you go out and you start playing, again, need to be patient, all right, and just make sure we're warming up properly, we're cooling down properly, because 3 months is a long time to go without any of that form of either decision-making or avoiding traffic, changing direction. And then mix up half court and full court. You know, the good discussion yesterday about the perception that, well, just keep it in the half court. You keep it in the half court and you split groups up each end, they'll actually have more reps. So being able to get up and down and use the full court as part of your trainings, right, is also important. And I think the last thing that I'll leave you with is we've got to have empathy and patience. All right, just be patient. We're not going out to play in any state championships, Australian National Junior Championships. I think for BTAS Country Cup, most likely will be the next big tournament from that standpoint for all our athletes. So just having a level of empathy and patience for them coming back in and support them. And we'll get through this phase and hopefully we'll be back to the new normal, which will be our normal practice sessions. So there's just some guidelines for you. If I've missed anything, Brad or Nick, do you have anything that we've discussed over the last week or so that I may have not touched on or you've thought of during that talk that we can share?
I thought it was good. We covered everything well.
Okay, and you're going to find within your own groups that you're going to have to adapt on the fly. I just urge you, and this has come from right from top from BA, it's come from obviously the research with the pro athletes, that we take a conservative approach and that we don't think that we're missing out or we're getting behind. All right, the worst thing that we can do is have injuries. People start pulling quads and calves, all right, or girls predominantly start getting stress fractures because we overload them too quick, all right? That is on us, all right? So let's keep a supportive approach and be really patient, all right, from that standpoint. Do we have any questions, Brad, come through? Nick, questions? No.
None
right.
as of yet.
All right, so I see Nick has all the email addresses, so I'll shoot that presentation off and it'll just prompt you for the notes that you may have taken or anything else. And again, we're here to support in any way we possibly can, whether it be through resources, conversations, any return to train strategies, or again, David Munns for any guidelines, you know, once we get back going. All right, I'll hand it over to Mr. Can for the presentation. All yours, Brad.
Thank you, Mark. Share this. Can everyone see that? Nick, can you see that, Mark?
Yeah, good.
Awesome. All right. Yep, so the presentation that I'll be doing today is going to be on talent identification and developing multi-skilled athletes. I'll just be taking everyone through basically my philosophy on it and how it relates back to selections in the BTAS program when it comes to it, and just really how we go about developing athletes and multi-skilling them. Ultimately, when trials come around or when we're down on the courts at local comps or rep comps or anything, we're always trying to see which is the next player we can identify to be in that photo there, who can be the next high performance athlete in either the short term or the long term. And we'll talk a little bit about long-term and short-term athlete development in a second. So 4 types of talent identification for me. First and foremost is morphological characteristics. So height, arm length, hand size, just any individual physiological of their makeup that gives them a distinct advantage. A good example would be a 7 foot tall player at under 20s. As a week gets on and fatigue sets in, other athletes whose athleticism might allow them to play at that height and jump and compete with them. As fatigue sets in, they mightn't jump as high where the 7 foot is. They're 7 foot at the beginning of the game, they're 7 foot at the end of the game. So it's a really important aspect of talent ID is the physiological makeup of the athlete. And not just the talent ID of the positives, but keeping in mind that when we're developing younger athletes and athletes who are still physically developing in themselves, that everyone's going to be individually different in their makeup. And there may be some negative aspects that hinder your development. So hinder their development as individuals. Like players with smaller hands have difficulty handling the basketball. It's something you need to take into consideration. People who have a lack of wrist flexion or flexibility in their forearm also might have difficulty shooting the ball correctly in what we dictate as correct technique at that time. And it's all got to be morphed and, shaped to suit each individual with that. Functional and motor abilities. So that's coordination, agility, lateral movement, mobility, stability, vertical jump and speed, as well as other major fitness groups, really the athleticism and the athletic ability of the player. And then specific basketball skills, so dribbling, passing, shooting, finishing, but also, which is really important here in our program, is the IQ of the athlete. Being able to make decisions at pace and understand the game and understand the reasons why we do things and why we're playing in a certain way. And the most important one as athletes progress and mature, for me, is definitely psychological and social characteristics of the athletes. So their determination, their competitiveness, their grit, so their passion and toughness, and also their resilience, which I haven't got there. Ideally, we want to be able to identify this in groups and in athletes as they come through. So in each region, when we come together as a state team or a country cup team, we can have some great success on the Australian stage. And as you can see, it's compulsory now for all BTAS staff to have that photo in all presentations. But that's the bronze medal of the under-20 boys from earlier this year. And another example would be the country cup under-14 girls did an outstanding job as well earlier this year. So just a general overview of the talent ID. I'm going to use age groups. That's just our landscape, and that's how we have it, and that's just realistic. It's how it works for us. Ideally, it wouldn't be. We'd be basing it a bit more around, the science would suggest that we'd base it more around players' development and where they actually are in their own individual development, both mentally and physically. But we live in a world where it's all based on age groups, which isn't perfect. We definitely can understand that, but I'm just going to use them today because it's easier to identify it with. So under 10s, 12s and 14s, any coach who has coached with me or has talked about selections with me would understand or know that I'm big on body types. So the physiology of the athlete, their height, their size, their length, and all those attributes, as well as their functional and motor skills. And I feel that's really important when we're talking about under 10s, 12s, and under 14 athletes, and about having a long-term athletic development view on it. And we're not necessarily wanting to win now at that level. And I think it comes back to being able to see that and understand what's best for the athletes. Okay, and understanding that when we have tall players and lanky players who might be a little bit uncoordinated and their minds haven't caught up with them at under 14s, we may not win many games. And I think great examples when we go to 14 nationals, at times we can struggle, or I'm sure any coach who's gone to 14 nationals, usually the teams in the top 6 have 1 or 2 man-childs in their team that have arguably a better mustache than me and are really working and competitive. So being able to be patient and just keep that in your head that you're working, it's for the athlete and it's what's best for them so they can reach their ceiling and their potential. And then obviously as athletes grow and mature and progress, on the flip side of that, I think 16s, 18s and 20s is where basketball specific skills and the psychological and social characteristics really start to come into it. So I know state coaches, we talk a lot about the importance of having athletes who have some grit, who can battle and who are ready to compete at a national championships, who have some basketball specific skills, like whose shooting is actually an elite level that allows them to be a knockdown shooter in nationals. Everyone can be an okay shooter, but who has a basketball specific skill like shooting that translate to that next level, that allows them to be identified and move up. And it comes back to the nature versus nurture conflict. And I had this conversation 2 weeks back, actually, coincidentally, with one of my HP athletes here who was doing a paper on it for school. And I'm very pro body type. And then from that, my confidence in both my coaching and the program, the coaches around me, I kind of feel like we can nurture the basketball specific skills and develop them as we go, as well as guide them and mentor them in the psychology side of it and the mental aspects, which they kind of also agreed with. And it was funny that they felt that way when I kind of felt like their development, they'd come from the other direction where they weren't as physiologically ideal for a basketball player as a younger athlete, but obviously are very elite in their mental approach to the game and have honed in and locked in on their basketball specific skills and have used that path. So I think although there's always a combination, it's not necessarily one situation fits all. There's definitely outliers where they'll just be a player regardless of size, regardless of length. They just might be mentally tough and mentally gritty, and they can overcome obstacles and progress further. And there's always going to be that. And obviously, pitches down the bottom, and that's what we're trying to do. Our ultimate goal is to select players from under 12s, and that's a photo from FDP camp last year, and progress them through. And hopefully in 4 to 6 years' time, we have some of those girls at that HP camp, which was earlier this year in Ulverston, playing in the bleed green game. And that's what we aspire and hope to select and progress through for our athletes. So developing multi-skilled athletes. Ultimately, as coaches, I think it's up to us to kind of try to anticipate, using our experience, the player's potential and their ceiling. And we always talk about evaluating athletes anytime we see them, and being able to just try to not guess, but have an idea in your head of what that athlete could achieve. Like, what is their ceiling? What could they get to at some point? And it comes back to when we're at training, can we multi-skill them so they can actually reach their ceiling? Can we put them in a position to be successful? And it comes back to us as coaches, is what are we doing to move them forward and progress them forward? So it's about what's in your practice. What is incorporated in your practice? And I'm not just talking ball handling and passing, shooting and finishing. I'd expect everyone to cover that. But making sure when you do ball screen work, that players who aren't just smaller guards and are smaller so they have to play guard are coming off the screen every time, but they're also getting the opportunity to set screens and roll and make decisions out of pick and roll to catch and skip or catch and make a move. And on the flip side of that, the bigger players aren't just being a screener. They're coming off screens. They're understanding when to sit and wombat, when to pocket pass, lob pass, when to throw back. And they understand all those cues more importantly, and they're able to articulate that and understand that through the game. Something that's I learned very early on when I started coaching from Matt Neeson, who was one of my early mentors when he came back from the AIS. He used to preach all the time to us that all players are point guards until they're 6'10", and then we'll worry about teaching them big skills. And I think that's now even more relevant in today's game than it was then, because the game's progressed further out. The 3-point line's even more important, and there's generally not too much proper size at the next level, at the international level. There's not too many 6'10", 6'11", men, 6'4", 6'5" girls walking around. So I think it's really important to have that mindset whenever we're developing athletes that they're all guards and they all need to be able to do every skill possible. And then we also have the importance of not boxing players. And that's the argument of, do we want to win now or do we have a long-term view on that athlete? And I think the best example is Lachlan Brewer. As you can see down the bottom here, 18 months ago, Lachlan Brewer was a sole centre, a 5-man for the Country Cup Tassie team that won at under 14 level. And then 9 months following that, he went away to under 14 club championships. Once again, he played predominantly the 5. I know following that, there was conversations with Mark, between him, Mark, his family, lots of communication in his inner circle, and he progressed a lot following that nationals, that 14 nationals, to 9 months in that last photo, playing at under 16 national championships and being a starting 3 and being able to handle the basketball. And I was fortunate enough to be his head coach on that team, and there's many times we asked him to handle the basketball in the backcourt against pressure, to defend guards up the floor. And through his work and his determination, he was able to progress in 18 months, which I think is a huge credit to him and his family and his circle and what he's been able to do. And the biggest accomplishment for him, just one of the things that really stick out in my mind is, I remember talking to my coaches, talking with Sarah and Hayden at halftime of the South Australia game, and we were very close, we were within shot, and they're a very talented team, and we hadn't played very well. And we were looking for scoring, and we couldn't really find it, but he was just so reliable, Lockie, and we looked down, and Sarah looked at the box score and coincidentally looked straight to him, and he had 4 threes in the first half. So we're talking about a player 18 months prior, predominantly didn't shoot outside the keyway, had progressed his game where he could handle pressure up the floor and was comfortable and confident being able to catch and shoot at that next level. And that's what we really want to encourage, that all athletes can play any position and they can progress over time, especially in our system. So it comes back to how we play and how you play as a coach and how you choose your offensive system and your offensive spacing, because it all comes and it dictates how your athletes develop. So what you incorporate in your offense, as well as the spacing of it, plays a major role. It's not just the practice and what goes into practice. For example, if you might play a shuffle type system where sometimes it's 3 out, 2 in, and there's lots of off the ball action where there's shuffle cut, back screen, flex cut, double staggers, double down, double across. And your players might become really good at making reads off screens, but there's some players that only become screeners. There's a lot of screening for some players during those offenses. And then, you might be running 4 out, 1 in, dribble drive, which is great. Like, there's lots of spacing. Players learn to dribble the ball. There's lots of movement off the basketball. There's lots of shooting. my experience with dribble drive, and I come from a dribble drive background, is that it, as great as it is, it's very, you can have a lot of success in it. Players can pick up bad habits at times. And I found the longer I did it and the more emphasis we did on dribble drive and penetration, it started to turn into the dribble-a-thon and trying to dribble the air out of the ball. But 4 out 1 in is a really good spacing. I know we do it. We use it for our flow concepts for our 16s, 18s. And flow is definitely something I'm all in on. And I know we use it in our BTAS program. And it just provides the athletes with a great variety of actions, of concepts, and it exposes them so they can develop as they mature through the age groups. And I'll get to it in a second, but final spacing there is 5 out, which is a really good spacing to develop multi-skilled athletes and positionless athletes. So as I just said, in the under 12s and under 14 FDP program, we run 5 out. So player at the top, players on the wings, player in each corner. And the aim of this is to expose all athletes to all the positions on the floor. We want to multi-skill the athletes, and we want to be able to put them in positions to make every decision possible during each concept. For example, down the bottom, if one, rather than passing to 2 and then cutting to the hoop, the 2 might back cut, and the 1 might go into dribble handoff at the 5 in the corner. I'd argue that a lot of other programs, possibly in Australia, may not have many actions where the 1 is handing off to their 5 and running off them. A lot of the time you find coaches at young ages especially boxing plays in, telling bigger players, go get to the block, go stand down there, be a big, get ready to rebound or circle under, or be a screener, where we've really embraced that, we're going to try and identify the bigger athletes and the body types, if you'd like, and the athletes that hopefully can continue on to be high performance athletes. But, it's difficult. We can't always get that right. So we have these things in place to ensure that everyone is getting every bit of development and every opportunity possible, and it eliminates the possibility of coaches boxing anyone in. It also allows you to layer the development of it. I'm a big advocate of 5 out. I did a little bit before I came to Tasmania, and we start under 12s here with pass and cut, which is so simple. And then we layer it as we go, and we continue to build as we move up. So we go pass and cut, then we might go back cut into dribble handoff, and then we might just go into hold, where we throw it to the wing, throw it to the corner, and go into a gets action, if anyone can follow that. But it's just being able to layer it with a basic spacing, I think, has really provided the athletes an opportunity to progress and evolve their skills. But in summary, the big things for talent ID for me comes down to physiology, the psychology, and the basketball specific skills that the athletes have. Us as coaches, we have great ownership over the long-term view of our players and their development, especially as junior coaches. And something that's always sat in my mind is when you see a junior coach at a rep tournament, a tri-series tournament, a club game, one of their players scores 30 points or something. And they're a bit happy and they're proud because one of their players has done really well. But do we have the ability to sit back and evaluate how that player scored their 30 points? Was it at the detriment of the other 9 players on the team not touching it? Was it through the success of the team all doing their job and playing their role, and everyone else got their points? So being able to analyze that and keep in mind that it's about the long-term development of all the athletes that you are coaching at that time. And of course, with that comes with finding an offense that allows a balance between winning and development. And that's something I definitely feel like we have right here with our system and what we have in place, and moving both offensively and defensively. And finally, just looking at your philosophy as a coach and being able to understand case by case each year, what's your team? What's most important to your team right now? Is it win now, or are you long-term development, which will be different for everyone? I imagine Sarah's view on this would be completely different to what my view would be with the under 16 boys state team there, to what my view would be to what Abby Dean's view would be with the under 12 North Red team at Tri-Series. So it's different as we go, and our philosophy needs to be able to suit and match each team because it will be varied. And for example, the under 16 teams here, although we want to be successful in under 16 nationals, we also have a long-term process in mind with these athletes. Like the girls probably more so in particular, there's some genuine size there. We understand that we want to be competitive. We want to be top 8 at nationals. You know, if it's not this year, that's fine. It might be under 18s, and that's where our main focus is. We want to be medals at under 18s or medals at under 20s. And if it has to take another 2 years for them to flourish, then, you know, we're in it for the long game. And I think that's the approach we need to have as junior coaches, probably more so or not, that, you know, it's about the long-term athlete development. And that's what our focus has to be in. Obviously, it changes team by team, but it's about being able to summarize how it suits you and where it fits for you. But thanks, everyone. And that's really just my views on it and what I had.
Thanks for that, Brad. I think you can speak on behalf of everyone, and a few comments came through the chat that, yeah, excellent presentation. A few questions have come through. If you just want to actually share your screen there, just so we get your, there you go, beautiful mustache in full view. Excellent.
Appreciate it.
So, yeah, a few questions have come through, so might go through maybe 3 or 4 of them. So the first one, so do you have any favourite drills or small-sided games to help develop multi-skilled athletes in a team, in a team practice setting?
That's a good question. I don't know if I'd have a particular drills in mind. I think just ensuring that the athletes have the opportunity to play in everything. So making sure that there's time allowed. So if we're playing 2-on-2 side pick and roll, making sure the rotations that come in aren't just the guard switches over offensive defense and the big switch over, for example, offense defense. But, you know, it's rotations by positions. Everyone gets to play everything.
Very good. And so obviously within all that you spoke about, you know, giving the athletes, you know, getting them to, you know, play different positions, there's definitely going to be times where it's going to be messy and training's probably not going to, you know, look pretty and all that. Do you have any tips on how to deal with the mess at practice and how to manage that as a coach when, you know, you maybe want to stop and say to a particular athlete, no, we're not going to have you get into that dribble handoff. Like, how, as a coach, can you help manage that?
Go to the other end? No, definitely. I think just being able to coach on the fly and coach on the run and set continual reminders. And if you're identifying a particular athlete that's having trouble, like maybe designating a coach or designating, if there's teams of subs, some senior players that can go and maybe work with that player as they go, or maybe sub them off and then discuss with them and talk them through it again. Just so also you aren't stopping and starting that either. So you aren't just stopping and blowing up training. You can kind of get coaching on the run a little bit more.
Excellent. And
can I touch on that one there, Nick, just to go on with what Brad has said? I think it's really important. But also, you know, with the younger age groups, why we want to have multi-skilled, and we're all for it 100%. That's why we run 5 out. That you don't want to put players in a position also where they just continually fail. So you might have to also adapt within certain drills until some kids just understand things a little bit better. It might not actually be a skill thing. It might be a cognitive thing that they just don't understand what they're trying to get done. And you may have to make some adaptations to it. An example of that is earlier on with Chloe Kiddo, we're not having her do dribble handoffs. Right now, she can do them now, and she can get 2 or 3 dribbles in, and they're not great, but she's more confident now. But earlier on, if we'd have had to do that, that just would have smashed her confidence. All right. So we then encourage players to come and get handoffs from her, all right, and then turn her into a screener from that standpoint. So being able to adapt in with individuals as well. So you've got to get little wins along the way as well, all right, to enhance development.
Good. Next question. Might just cap it there. 2 more. There's a bunch coming through now. Thanks, everyone. So, Brad, what do you see as a talent area that takes a long time to develop? And again, do you have any strategies on what you might recommend to either speed up that development or help keep the player, engaged and motivated to keep having a crack if they're, it's taking them a while to pick up a particular skill or concept?
I think shooting is a master skill, and I think that's probably for me the most important thing that athletes need to shoot, and it's difficult. And we can all talk about getting more shots up, but being disciplined and being locked in and getting shots. So having variety in their shooting techniques, not just shooting with their technique form at the hoop, but also doing some lying down away from the hoop, doing some with the coach and without a coach, just being able to mix things up, doing visualization. But that would be a major skill that I just think I think it's easy to be okay at, but it's really difficult to be elite at. And not many players are elite shooters, and it's a separating factor.
And final question here, and again, thanks everyone for the questions. There's a few that we're not going to be able to kind of get to, but I'm sure we're happy to have a discussion about them at another time. So final question, at what age should or can you try to develop the psyche of a player, especially that grittiness, the mental side of things?
I don't think there's an age. And I think this science would back that each individual develops both physically and mentally at different stages, at different ages. So to what, you might be able to discuss psychology stuff with me. You might be able to do that with you, Nick, much earlier. Okay, my development might have been much later than yours. Probably not, but we just develop at different stages. So I think it comes back to trust and knowing your athletes and being able to read them and being able to connect with them and understand where they're up to in their mental development.
Very good. And there's one more question here around any tips on your mustache and how to, how you've been able to get that done.
Not been easy. It's a week of hard work since April, but it's about perseverance, determination, grit. Some people have that psychological and social characteristics we talked about, and this is just a byproduct of it.
And some people have commented around my mustache, and just for everyone to know, mine's about 3 weeks old. Brad's is about 4 months old. So.
3 months old.
All right, I might hand over back to Mark if there's any final comments or things to wrap us up.
Yeah, just fantastic presentation, Brad. Really good. I got some thoughts out of that and some notes. A couple of things that I just want to share before we go is that in talent ID, you're not looking for the next Taryn Armstrong or Shelby Rayner or Taylor Mole or Sean Haywood or Cy Deans. You're not looking for those. They find themselves. Right? You're looking for the one that everybody else doesn't see. All right? And sometimes you got to get it wrong. And I've been in this job 7 years, and I've supported some athletes right through, and I've got it wrong. They just haven't come on. But I'll guarantee you that if you're in development and you take a long-term view, that you're going to get some wrong and you're going to get some right. And that's just part of it. Doesn't matter whether it's us. The NBA draft 50 players each year and they don't get them all right. And they do background checks back to where they were born and grew up. talent identification is an inexact science. So the courage to actually take a chance on somebody, you think, yeah, there may be something there, and then persevering, because the meaning of grit is passion and perseverance to a long-term goal. That's what grit is. Right. So if you can get kids at 5, 6, 7, 8, and they have a passion for basketball, and then they have a long-term goal and they can persevere with it, that's grit, and they just stay in it. And we got to find the ones that are not the easy choices. We all see them. Walk into the stadium and see Sardines, we can all see him. He's a no-brainer. We've got to find the ones, all right, and have some patience and some empathy, and keep working with them, the ones that are not clearly identifiable at 12s, 14s, and maybe sometimes 16s. Right? And sometimes we might get that wrong. So being patient with that. That's about it. That's what I had. Super job, Brad. Really thank everybody. We didn't want to make, we've got to have these a little bit more regular, like over, try and get together once a month and make them continuous. So we don't want to make them, long. We want to make them short hits where you can get some stuff and hopefully get back to your clubs, or we can get back on floor and we can introduce some stuff from our coaching Zooms, more than having, 2 hours of content. There's a lot of information out there. So 2 hours of content, and you go back and you're trying to sift through it. You can't transfer something back into your coaching straight away, because that's usually the best time to do it. Short hit, short clinic, get some good little bites out of it, and then, okay, now where can I introduce that quite quickly? So from there side, I encourage you to recap your notes. Nick will get this presentation and Brad's presentation out. Recap your notes as quick as you can in the next 24 hours, right? It's usually the best time, or they drift. So get your thoughts together and then start to plan, where you may introduce something, or where this may have changed your thoughts on athlete development. And I would encourage everybody to take a look at the long-term athlete development program that Canada have introduced. I've touched on it, but I haven't researched right into it. But over the last 10 years, they've done an outstanding job as a country, not just as basketball, but basketball has definitely been a benefactor of it. So long-term athlete development in Canada, and Canadian basketball has just gone on an upward trend, very, very strong now. But it's taken 10 years of this program to work. So hopefully little bits and pieces that we can try and introduce here will help us continue getting better and better as we can. So again, thanks everyone. If we can do anything lead back into this return to training phase, all right, don't hesitate to reach out, and can't wait to get back on the floor with everybody at a camp and get together and chat.